Jack.
Levi.
The Book Club from Hell.
Hello everyone, this is Jack with the Book Club from Hell, a support group for recovering and relapsed metal musicians. The intro music was longer than usual this time because Alex, the drummer and vocalist of the blood metal band Masticate, sent us some clips of himself playing drums over our podcast theme, and I didn't want to talk over it. If you want to hear more of that, Masticate's Bandcamp and Spotify links are in the show notes. They've got one album out at the moment, Power Through Bloodshed, and are currently recording a second one. Anyway, this is our second episode on the Sovereign Individual, so I don't have much to add in terms of introducing this episode's subject matter. If you haven't listened to our first episode on this book, I advise you to listen to that one at least a few hundred times before progressing to today's episode. Anyway, enjoy.
Agents that can, reactively learn about their environment and then, update their goals and do all this sort of stuff. And then you put that in a fucking goddamn robot dog, strap a robot dog to the to a fucking, I don't know, rocket launcher or something, or strap a rocket launcher to the robot.
Wait, where's this going?
And then it's like software engineers.
Don't give it away. We've been planning an autonomous weapons startup, and you're about to spill the beans on it.
Yeah, we're gonna go and get funding, partner with Palmer Lucky. Get some Palmer Lucky's Oculus money. Start.
Yes, we have this grand vision of being able to automate war crimes, and I reckon there's a lot of money there. Yeah, sorry, what were you saying?
Huge market. I was thinking, well, if my job does get totally fucking automated, and I'm just fat out of luck at being a software engineer or whatever, I can always just fall back on being an obscure podcast host.
Yep.
It's like a backup plan.
That requires more Patreon subscribers, though. That requires more people on the $60,000 a month Patreon tier.
Yeah. So we do have a couple of subscribers, at least one, right?
Oh no, we've got more than one. We've got shout out San Marzano, Supremacy, J-Man. We've got
you guys are fucking champions.
There's I think it was our first patron. I don't think is on the Discord, or at least has a different name. So, I mean, shout out to them as well.
Whoever you are, thank you.
Yeah, whoever you are, all of you, thank you. You're funding our autonomous weapons startup. And what we're going to do, we're going to code into our murder bots that if you send in a picture of your face on Patreon, they won't shoot on sight.
You'll be rounded up and brought to us, and we'll shoot you ourselves.
You'll escape.
That's your privilege.
You'll escape our microtransaction-enabled war crimes. It's basically
just going to use Lightning Network to stream
and if you hold up your credit
you.
card to it, it can deduct a 50-cent microtransaction, and it'll spare your life. Our model is really just it's high throughput, so 50 cents per transaction is pretty low, but if you're scanning whole cities worth of people, then the numbers add up.
Yeah, that's how it works. That's how it works. Autonomous weapons startup. The Book Club from Hell becomes the robot dogs from hell. I don't know.
Yeah, well, because we're making a product. I don't think it's a big.
Nice
it's not a big additional expense to attach speakers to our murder robots and have them playing the podcast the whole time. Because so you can double as autonomous weapons, but also some podcast advertising. Because people will be hearing the podcast at the same time, and some of them, if they survive, might go on to be listeners. People who subscribe to the Patreon will be able to vote on which episode gets played.
in the little apocalypse, the Book Club from Hell goes full T800 on the entire planet.
Yeah, so this is what the future will look like. This wasn't explicitly spelled out in The Sovereign Individual, but I think that's probably what they were hinting
But
at.
if you sort of like read between the lines, kind of what they're
Squint.
saying. If you squint and then swap out The Sovereign Individual for the Book Club from Hell.
Yeah, exactly.
Crypto nukes Australia.
Nuclear Queensland, Bitcoin, new Hyperborea shooting Rexona rockets into space or into the sun, and autonomous weapon systems.
And Lightning Network-enabled
us.
autonomous human-killing drones. Yep.
Yeah,
That's us.
exactly. It's actually a pretty complicated customer pitch, isn't it?
Yeah. So if you support us on Patreon, that's what you'll get.
Yeah, exactly. There's a direct line between supporting us on Patreon and the world we just described. That could be the future if you help us make it. So last episode with The Sovereign Individual, we got up to what the future would look like. We talked about the past and talked about megapolitics a lot. But my headphones stopped working when we were about to talk about what the future looked like. So now we're back. And we can talk about the future that the authors, I think, play it being sensitive about initially when they bemoan how there'll be much more small-scale violence, there'll be a lot more crime, there'll be a lot of people who lose out. But as the book progresses, they become, if not become colder and colder, then reveal their coldness when they keep calling those people losers and quite happily talk about how the most productive members of society will be free of the mass of humanity and won't have any more obligations to them imposed by governments.
Yeah.
It'll be
Daddy
beautiful.
Jeff gets released from the clutches of the fucking Uncle Sam.
Yeah, exactly. When Daddy Jeff can enslave all of us.
You can just have...
That guy's on the... I bet that guy's taking performance-enhancing drugs. Have you seen pictures of him?
Yeah, 100%.
His arms are just inflated.
Dude, guy's like 50-something and he's just like went from being a scrawny, flabby, like... What's that thing that they call? It's not even dad bod. It's just like flabby... Oh, you know what? Bronze Age pervert would have called him a yeast. Like
yeah.
Human. That's what he was. And now he's just yoked up motherfucker. Like, it looks like he fucking could just crush his skull with his
all those
bare
sweet
hands.
Amazon bucks are going into D-Bowl.
Dude, he could get the purest shit on the planet, you know?
It'd be so good.
Like, apparently I think he lives in LA and he bought like a $400 million house or some shit like that. So, you know, he's just got like celebrity doctors and celebrity chefs and celebrity like personal trainers. He probably spends millions of dollars a year on just like getting the best of all that shit. You know?
Now that you put it that way, it's kind of unimpressive how he looks. Like, if he's getting that much up, he should look way better. No, if he's spending that much money, he should look like Ronnie Coleman. He should look like a cloud with the amount of muscle on his body.
He just like creates the cloud and then he becomes a cloud.
Yeah. He can be the personification of AWS. He can be the physical cloud as the walking advertisement for the cloud services.
He has so much money, he could literally pay Ronnie Coleman to swap his body with him and just do a head transplant and then pay enough money to reverse all the damage he done to Ronnie Coleman's body. And then pay for a young person's spine, replace that.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm sure that's like medically possible, right, at this point? Yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
So we're kind of up to chapter 6, roughly, if we map it. I know we've sort of been jumping around the book a bit. We're not exactly following it, but it's sort of like roughly. This is where it starts getting, I think, like here onwards is really fun, the book. The first half of the book, I find like it's interesting, but it's maybe not as speculative, you know? Like sort of from chapter 5. No, I guess chapter 4 onwards. But yeah, like, I don't know. I like the more speculative parts of it. I really like it. And when they start making like really concrete predictions about technologies, it's really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the main concepts they have they're pulling on is the idea of, they call it the triumph of efficiency over power. And essentially this is like one person in principle, and not in principle, like this happens all the time. There's a really cool online community called Indie Hackers, indiehackers.com. They've got a cool podcast. I listen to them, and every now and then, like a person will get on, and it'll be like, oh yeah, this one person is making $1 million a year and they don't have any employees and they do it just by selling their software or selling their, I don't know, like online courses or whatever. And it's really fucking cool. Like, it's amazing that that's even a thing that can happen, you know? And that's just the insane efficiency. Versus, like, if you wanted to make that sort of money, like, sort of like last century, like Fat Luck doing it as a one-person, like, joint and doing it, like, without any employees and doing it from your home. Like, it just wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
The cost of distribution of certain services now is so low. It's just trivial.
Yeah, it's amazing. Versus, like, you know, if you wanted to, like, say, take Henry Ford, like, he was able to do what he did in part because he had to scale up these, like, massive vertically integrated operations and, like, coordinate huge amounts of labor and then, like, cut up the labor into, like, very discrete skills that could be standardized. And, like, in a way, what you wanted is, like, for the employees or the labor to be replaceable and fungible. And it's like, now we're in almost the exact opposite of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It is interesting, though. So when they talk about these sovereign individuals, these people who can independently of location scale their abilities and make lots of money with their work and with their ideas, it does really seem that they're talking about only certain types of work.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's
fair. Because in the future, you're still going to need someone, or somehow you're going to need, for example, rare earth minerals to be mined so that we can have smartphone screens or something like that.
Yes.
So there's going to be such a division in terms of how people make money, what sort of money they make, and the conditions under which they make money. And they do talk about how this division is going to be so much wider, how you are going to have this class of people who can, by themselves, without any employees or only hiring, say, temporary contractors, make lots of money, move between jurisdictions if they don't like the tax agreement in a certain jurisdiction or something like that. And then these people who are, it seems like they'll almost exist feudally, how they'll live like on a cobalt mine or something like that and just be owned body and soul by BHP Billiton.
Sorry, I'm interrupting. I just made the mistake of reading a comment from the Discord. Guy Alex. He just said, I'm on the verge of total madness, reading through every single Instagram post made by Eleanor Selke. With each word I read, I feel an imaginary alternate reality, SE5, being pushed further and further up my ass.
Shout out to Alex. One of our many Swedish
I'll put the Discord away.
It blows my mind that one of our largest listening groups is Sweden.
So funny. That's hilarious.
Anyway, what was I saying? Anyway, yeah.
I'll put that fucking shit away. Talking about super efficient like communications. I'm getting sick meme and Eleanor Solke like references dropped on me like in real time. From a
interestingly, Eleanor Selke and Don Paris, PhD, would have a reasonable chance of being, if not sovereign individuals, because the authors of this book said that sovereign individuals will only comprise a small proportion of the population because of the amount of money you need. But they probably would be able to move between jurisdictions pretty easily because their value proposition is, well, I was going to say immaterial and then realised that, at least in their minds, it is purely immaterial. But it's non-localized. You don't need to be in a certain place to be Eleanor Selke and Don Paris, PhD, recording Tibetana 3 and releasing it on Spotify, or releasing $600 SE5 advanced courses on Udemy. They're actually, wow. I hadn't thought of that. Eleanor Selke and Don Paris, PhD, really could be could be sovereign
individuals.
Like if Bali starts taxing them too much, they could move and live elsewhere.
Holy shit.
Yeah, wow. I guess the only limiting factor is they would need access to bodies of water with dolphins in them. But apart from that, they're not
Which
really
still leaves them like
restricted, are they?
the Caribbean, like probably like plenty of Southeast Asia would be viable.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah, maybe
Wherever, I don't really know where
like
dolphins
Greece,
live besides like in the ocean, but
in the ocean
there's a lot of
somewhere.
stuff there.
And can't they communicate with them like telepathically anyway? So they can kind of ask them to come anywhere.
Yeah,
right?
so it depends on what sort of dolphin services they're offering. If they're just dolphin consultancy services, that could be done anywhere because the Ilanaselka could be in the middle of Berlin and communicate telepathically with dolphins and consult that.
But I think
way.
they like to.
If they're swimming with dolphins, then they do need to be a bit more physically localized.
So chapter 7 is transcending locality, and really like Eleanor Solke and Don Paris PhD have already been doing that for like years now with transcending the locality of their, not just the locality but the dimensionality of their physical form and projecting into higher planes to be with the dolphins. I mean, why are we even reading the fucking Sovereign Individual at this point? We really should just reread Eleanor Selke.
Do you reckon they've read The Sovereign Individual? And if not, could we send them copies of it so they can read it and then give a seminar?
I'll be in Bali soon. I could go and visit them.
I'm still fairly sure that their dolphin viewing services is actually just a swingers club. Be very careful when you show up there.
Yeah, it was just like, obscure podcaster murdered in Bali.
Don Paris PhD.
Yeah, Jack becomes famous after
SE5.
Levi's horror. Yeah. Turns out it's actually an unbelievably powerful weapon. Just eviscerates me. just like
making fun of it all this time.
What is that in Star Trek where they just like dematerialize the body with the transporter teleporter? Dematerializes me.
Yeah, he could probably do that to you. Could do that to both of us.
Yeah, that'd be a pretty cool.
This is why you have to live every day as if it could be your last, because we've thrown shade at the Don Paris PhD, and he could dematerialize us at any moment.
Yeah, or at the very least, he could like.
We have the sword of Damocles hanging over our heads, the SE5 of Damocles.
Yeah,
hanging over our immaterial souls.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that one other aspect besides non-locality of at least the class of people who'll be able to move around and in the future and thereby get better sovereignty agreements with a panoply of different sovereignty providers is also that money will be, or wealth in general, will be much harder to steal, or certain types of wealth. So they talk about how there's going to be gold-backed cyber money.
Digital wealth. Yeah, they fucked that up.
Yeah, which at least all the Bitcoin maximalists who love this book will say, well, it's just Bitcoin. So certain people will be able to put all their wealth into Bitcoin.
Backed up by...
Which provides a degree of protection of theft from governments or from violent actors. Like there still exist, the $5 wrench attack where someone buys a wrench for $5 and then corners you and says, transfer your Bitcoin to me or I'll hit you with the wrench. But it is harder to steal.
Multi-sig wallets, Jack.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
And also, there are certain types of wealth because, again,
don't
someone is going to need to do things like mine raw materials. Energy generation, I expect, like you'd probably have feudal microstates showing up around power plants or something like that.
Did you see that China's like commissioning like 200 nuclear power plants to be built, something like that? Was it 200 or 20?
Oh, really? That's a lot of nuclear
it's like
power plants.
It's fucking crazy. No, they're just like, yeah, fuck it. We need more energy. Fuck you guys. And you know what? I'm not normally a big fan of like what the CCP's got going on and stuff, but I think like if at least one country is being proactive with nuclear, I think that's good, even if it's like a country that I don't really like. I'm not a big fan of like their like.
Yeah, I like nuclear power a lot.
I think if maybe if nothing else, if they are actually doing that, then like that'll get everybody else to start like investing in nuclear again after the fucking like dark winter of nuclear for like the last 50 years.
Yeah.
So that would be good. But anyways,
but it's interesting. So with nuclear plants, that's an interesting question. That brings that brings up a question I had with this book of energy generation. So if you've got
they don't talk about
this huge fracturing of sovereignty in the future, and sovereignties are just much smaller, and some of them are not even localized to one geographic area, what do you do in terms of things like electricity generation? Just given at least for current technologies, for baseload power, the capital requirement for those is huge.
And the coordination is difficult.
Yeah, how do you coordinate that?
And also like I don't agree that it's a natural monopoly, like, but it's definitely like I can see why somebody might call it a natural monopoly. Like, you don't really want there being too many, like, say, power lines going down the street, like, so there is kind of a natural, kind of like spatial limitation on just running that sort of infrastructure over a landscape.
Yeah. Well, it's a combination of that, but also it reminded me of how earlier in the book they talked about how, for example, in Egypt, you had these more centralized states, in part because irrigation allowed a central authority quite a lot of coercive power over other people, because they could just cut off water and you'd starve if you didn't do what they wanted. And it's not a perfect analogy, but I do think it does bear some resemblances providing electricity to people. Yeah. In that if you're the person or the group who controls whatever source of electricity generation you're using, whether it's coal power, gas, nuclear, etc., you can cut that off to people. And I'd imagine that would allow for that'd allow for quite authoritarian states to grow up around electricity generation. And those could have the ability to coerce basically everybody else around them and become governments.
As a countervailing trend to that, though, there are, we'll see where the future takes us with like what ends up like winning out in different parts of the world. But like, there's also lots of distributed energy technologies. Like obviously solar power being like one as well. That seems to be finally commercializing after 30 years of intense government subsidies.
Just the tone of your voice. I can just picture your face as you say that.
But to be fair, I throw shade at the solar energy industry, but to be fair, fucking the petrochemical industries get shitloads of like subsidies and stuff, which I don't agree with that either. So like, just so you know. But the flip side is the difference with nuclear though is like, in principle, physically at least, like if we actually really invest in nuclear, to me it seems like an almost completely hegemonic, like, at least with regards to like large population centers, if you just have like clean and safe, fail-safe nuclear power, I just don't see why you would need anything else for the electricity of the population center.
Yeah, that's true, but I guess in the context of this book, where they say that governments are going to become so indebted and be so starved of revenue streams that they're just going to fall to pieces, that does raise the question of what happens. So suppose you have a city or a group of people who get all of their power from one nuclear plant. I think that's a centralizing force that the authors don't really acknowledge in this book, that whoever controls that nuclear plant is, if not the sole ruler of the area around them, which is supplied with electricity by that nuclear plant, then there'll be such a significant figure.
Although they do talk about city-states, right? Like we might see a re-emergence of city-states because wasn't it back in they raised this interesting historical comparison to like Italy, I think, back in the day, like Florence and Venice and Rome and stuff. They were essentially city-states, and it was almost like a confederation of city-states or something like that. I'm not familiar with Italian history, like super familiar, but that's kind of my vague understanding. So you might have more like Singapore, Hong Kong situations, you know, like in the case of a country like the United States, like maybe you have like more state power or even like full-on cities becoming sort of more sovereign. Like, I don't know where this goes in the long run. I do think that like there's so many, you can essentially, how do I put this? There's so many data points you could pull on to almost tell any narrative you want. I could spin a yarn about how the world's going to become more centralized because of this like topology of this power versus like power source or energy source versus like it's going to become more decentralized because of the emergence of like this information technology, but then it will become this more centralized because of this other information technology. Like there's a lot of data that you could pull on. And which like trend is going to be more powerful, I don't really know.
Yeah. At least in terms of this book, my read was that the authors were saying that it will just be more diverse. So whether a certain area is more centralized or more subject to centralized authority, or whether it isn't, is going to be much more variable. So, for example, with the city-state idea, which I just reflexively like when people say there are going to be more city-states. I don't know if it's actually a good or a bad thing to have more city-states. I just, in an animal way, like that idea.
You like it? Really? What is it about? You want to be a pirate king? I assume you want to be a pirate king.
I just find it's just a very aesthetically pleasing idea that you have all of these little polities, these tiny little city-states all over the place.
I'm
not saying this is a considered position. I'm saying I just like how it feels.
It just appeals to you. Just like
it really appeals to me.
There's no underlying, no consistent like political philosophy. You're just like, I just really like it.
No, not at all. I just like city-states. Cards on the table.
It just sounds cool as well, doesn't it? City-state.
I don't feel the need to.
I would love to see like the Northern Territory secede.
So, when they're talking about how, at least in their view, there'll be less predatory violence in terms of governments invading other governments or nation-states invading other nation-states, because there's going to be less wealth that is easily seized because much more of it will be online. I see that as meaning that geography will really determine how much violence there is in an area. Geography and among other things. So, for example, if one polity has access to a lot of mineral wealth and they're generating a lot of money from that, well, that polity is an area that would be a good target for invasion. Whereas if a polity makes money basically by taxing ever so slightly, I should add, because the two authors of this book are not big fans of tax. If a polity gets money by gently taxing the people within it who generate money by all being podcast hosts or something like that, doing some sort of non-local...
an all-powerful podcast host.
Can you imagine
an army of
living in a city-state of podcast hosts?
Oh, God. Insufferable bunch of douchebags.
Anyway, yeah.
Could you imagine living in a cityscape ruled just total autocracy of Jack and Levi?
That'd be
just
great,
completely
because I would be one of the rulers. I wouldn't want to live in there as a pleb, but I would want to live there as me.
Yeah. Sounds good to me.
How good would it be to just be able to arbitrarily impose your will on other people like that? You know what? On Wednesday, you're not
sometimes-
allowed to wear pants. And if I do see someone wearing pants on the street, they'll be immediately executed.
Off with the
But
head.
only on Wednesday.
Yeah, off with the head.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to be
I sometimes-
executed in the most extravagant way. They'll be shot out of a cannon or something like that.
Like, slung from a catapult into a brick wall.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
So I was thinking about, I'm reading, I think I mentioned it, have I mentioned this already? But I'm reading slowly reading this book called For Good and Evil, The Impact of Taxes on Human Civilization. It's such a fucking good book.
It's such a Levi book to read.
And it's so dumb. It's so good though, because it's like, like you think, the history of taxes, that sounds fucking boring. But it's actually really interesting, and the author makes a really
civilization.
Yeah, that it's like if you read like say a biography of Alexander the Great or whoever, it's like that's only one person and like his small part of the world, but like taxes actually give you quite a high resolution like insight into the everyday happenings of like the people. And it's really interesting. But yeah, like the pharaohs, it starts with like a historical investigation of the like tax regimes throughout the history of ancient Egypt up until the Ptolemaic period, and it's really interesting. What's really interesting is that the how do I put this, like. They were like god kings, right? The pharaoh was essentially a deified person, and that's not just them. Like the Persians were as well, and I think the Romans kind of did that to the. I think, or if not full-on deification, they definitely deified them after they died and stuff. And yeah, it's just weird to think that like there were these people who would just like walk around a city of like 250,000 people, and they could just like look at somebody and be like, kill that person, and they would kill the person. What the fuck? That's crazy. But I want that power. That's crazy when it's somebody else with the power. It sounds like a good idea when it's me and Jack.
Yeah, that'd be really cool. That'd be very cool to have absolutely arbitrary power.
Complete and arbitrary power.
Yeah, and you'd attract people to this polity with really low taxes. So you will be subject to our whims, but you're not going to be taxed much.
But how will we fund everything then?
I don't know, Bitcoin mining or something. Something really, really high margin.
Maybe we can tax other people. Maybe we can find some slaves and we'll tax them, and then we'll let the hyper productive people like come and live with us like tax free. Maybe we'll just have a two-caste society where it'll be like Dubai or something.
So what were we saying earlier? Oh yeah, I expect, at least given the mental model offered by this book, I think that there will still be pockets in the world of intergroup violence, but it's going to be between places where there are natural resources that they can steal. I guess part of it is just also brevity. Like they're not going to go into huge detail on every single possible outcome of the future, but I don't think they really mentioned that there might be areas where there will be increased violence between groups. They seem to say that just globally there's going to be way less violence because everyone's going to be using Bitcoin or some sort of cryptocurrency, and that just reduces the returns on violence. And I'm not sure that's really going to be the case.
Depends on your thesis of how much like an asset like Bitcoin sorry, excuse me. An asset like Bitcoin actually demonetizes other asset classes. Because if which is still an open question.
I think it would reduce the value of certain assets, like
certain
state-backed currencies. But in terms of raw materials, especially if everyone is becoming more online, not less, I can only imagine the value of those things would go up even more.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, we obviously need to like have the physical infrastructure. Like cyberspace, it's kind of a misnomer to call it like cyberspace, really, isn't it? It makes it sound like
there are
it's
still
some
like undersea
magical,
cables
ethereal
and
thing.
things linking continents.
There's
or
cables
satellites.
and data centers and computers, and it's all physical still. Yeah.
One thing that might reduce the amount of intergroup violence is they also said that that defensive technology will become so much more powerful. In particular, the ability to retaliate against people who attack you. Even after your own death, you could have some sort of bot that searches for whoever it was that killed your physical body, and then, I don't know, empties out their bank account or deletes data or does a ransomware attack on them, something like that. Just your ability to retaliate will be so much higher that few people will engage in that sort of violence because the cost of it will be so high.
That's really interesting, especially since we've seen recently the breakthroughs in reinforcement learning. Like, you know, a few years ago, there was that Alien, I think it was Alien Requiem, was that it? The video game where they like made Alien like this reinforcement learning bot that like learned how to fucking hunt you down.
Alien Isolation. Yeah, that was great.
Alien Isolation, yeah, fucking terrifying game. Yeah, imagine that shit, but like the robot is like in the real physical world coming after your fucking physical body. Like, you're fucked. Essentially, you're fucked. And I think that like that technology, if it's not already here, like when really not that far off, like maybe we're 10 years off from being able to like basically manufacture thousands of like agile land-based drones, or like fairly agile air drones that are small, can go into a city and you can just be like, kill every human that you identify as over the age of 12 or something. You know, like that's essentially here. Like we have those things. Those DJI drones, like imagine just like strapping IEDs to those, you know, like. So we live in this crazy era where I kind of actually just, you know, like now I'm saying this out, like I kind of disagree with them. I think those sorts of swarm drone technologies are just like such offensive technologies. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Like you can launch a whole drone swarm from the other side of the fucking planet.
Yeah, and it's so hard to defend against that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like they can fly sub-radar, like tiny little machines.
The avenues for terrorism are enormous.
It's crazy. I don't know. Like, I hope to fuck the Australian, like, what is it? The Australian Defence Forces are like thinking this shit through for my sake.
Yeah.
Shout out to anybody in ADFA. Well, you guys are doing a great job. Keep it up. Keep on studying, boys. Bloody hell.
Yeah.
Scary shit.
I think making predictions about whether there'll be more or less violence in the future is really difficult because so much of it is based on technology, and the authors do acknowledge that. But yeah, it's the offensive capacity of drone swarms is enormous, but also we don't know. Maybe there will be some sort of technology developed that completely neuters that threat. It's hard to say, but at least the way things are going, I expect actually your offensive capability will probably be only increased compared to today.
Unless it's just one of those things where it's like an arms race for deterrence, you know, like what happened in the Cold War with nuclear. It's like, okay, well, we've got these drones that are even more powerful.
Yeah, but I think that only works if it's between a relatively small number of actors. So rather than, say, a group like ISIS, or even just some nutcase who wants to kill a bunch of people. The ability of people like that to amplify the violence they can cause compared to today is huge.
So we really, I like, you could say that Bitcoin is defensive technology and cryptography is defensive technology in the context of cyberspace, but in the context of physical space, like I haven't seen a countervailing. I'm not aware of a countervailing defensive technology that can like defend effectively against swarms of drones.
No.
Like maybe there's something in development, but I haven't seen it yet.
No, and I think that is a criticism I have of this book, that they really do seem to think or they give me the impression that they think that cyberspace is this place that's completely divorced from the physical world. And if you're making your money on there and if you store your wealth on there, then things in the physical world can't affect you nearly as much.
Yeah, like maybe you could say like, okay, if I put all my wealth in Bitcoin or some other digital asset, and then like I store the public keys or the private keys in my head, and that means I can leave when I want, so I can run away to, like my country's being invaded, I go. And sure, that's true, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, but your country's being swarmed by drones. Like, you still need to defend against that. It's like you go to the next country, what are you going to do there? Are they going to get swarmed by drones? Like, we still need physical defense.
Yeah. And I also think a lot of the arguments the authors use to justify why they think people won't be attacking each other so much are quite economic. And I do think the economics of violence are really important. I think a lot of interstate violence is because states think that they're going to get more stuff by invading other states or by attacking them. But there's also a significant irrational component.
Various ideologies.
When I say irrational, I don't mean that it's not powerful. I just mean that it's not necessarily based on a monetary cost-benefit analysis. Like they might invade another country, or one group might attack another group because of a perceived slight.
Yeah.
Or because they have a different reading of history or a different historical myth than another one.
Yeah.
Or because they have a different religious worldview or some different epistemology. There are a lot of reasons like that which I don't think they might be mitigated by changing the economic circumstances within which violence exists, but I don't think they'd be removed.
Yeah, and maybe that's one of the things you need to sort of take with a grain of salt is their arguments are essentially almost entirely economic, and they've ignored those sort of like ideological or cultural aspects.
Yeah, well, not only ignore, they explicitly discount them. So they refer to people who feel this deep need to belong to a group as belongers, fairly derogatory way. The thing is, though, I think the vast majority of people are so-called belongers. I think most people have a very deep need to belong to some sort of
I imagine
group
that those guys are belongers. They've probably got a group
within which they can contextualize their lives. I think that's a very, very foundational requirement for most.
I'm sure.
And I don't think it's a
Willian,
bad
Rees-Mogg,
thing.
And yeah. Probably more healthy to feel a sense of belonging to a smaller, less abstract group than a nation state. But nonetheless.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
But feeling a deep sense of belonging to something more local, like your local community, to a church group, to a podcast Discord server.
To a podcast. Yeah, or a book club, or a podcast about a book club. Yeah, any of those things really, but mainly the last.
Any of those equally valid things. I think I think belonging to something larger than yourself and having a feeling of something existing above you is very psychologically healthy for the vast majority of people.
Something larger than yourself and feeling like you perhaps like the deification of two, men talking to them disembodied over the internet, feeling like dedicating your life to Jack and Leafly is a very healthy response to
I think particularly dedicating the financial part of your life to us is very important.
Via Patreon. Support us on Patreon. Yeah.
Support us on Patreon, or we could probably just put our Bitcoin wallet addresses up as well.
Yeah, Lightning.
I would not say no to people sending me Bitcoin.
Yeah, send us Lightning Network. Is super cheap, man. Download Phoenix Wallet. We'll put up our barcode somewhere, and you can send us Lightning payments. It's like I sent a Lightning payment to my friend. You know what it cost? It cost 9 satoshis. 9 satoshis. That we figured out that was less than 0.4 cents Australian cents. 0.4 Australian cents. And it was like instantaneous.
Damn it. Transaction costs that low on Lightning.
Yeah, it's nuts, and it's instantaneous. It's like literally there as fast as we send a text message. It's crazy. No intermediaries, and the transaction is anonymous because it's wrapped like Tor. That's fucking
wild.
crazy.
Yeah, I didn't know it was
it's fucking crazy.
that cheap.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, just from our phone.
You know, a bunch of Bitcoin people on Twitter have been sharing our Atlas Shrugged episode because we made so many Bitcoin jokes in it.
Did they like
it? I really should use the Twitter account more. I barely go on it.
That's so funny. Yeah, the Bitcoin.
Hopefully, the Bitcoin people will like these sovereign individual episodes too.
Fucking Michael Saylor, and it's just like Michael Saylor goes nuts for the book club from hell.
Shout out to the fucking Bitcoin degenerates on Twitter. I love you.
There is no second best. There is no second best.
What about this idea
Crazy
of virtual
technology.
corporations that they bring up? I thought that was pretty interesting. I'm not sure to what extent it'll be workable, but also it does represent how a lot of business is done at the moment.
No, like I'll fucking go. No, dude. Like the last two businesses I've worked for, they didn't even have physical offices. Like the business I'm working for at the moment, like literally just got a physical office, and it's been in operation for like 3 years. And they only did that because it's nice to have a physical space.
I think the idea of a virtual corporation was really cool and showed a great degree of foresight and definitely exists in certain fields. But there are certain areas where, so they use car manufacturing as an example of a possible virtual corporation where you basically you subcontract the manufacture of the doors to some country some company, say in India, and then some of the electronics components from Taiwan, and you get all of these parts from all over the place and then get them sent to some location for the car to be assembled exactly to the user's or the customer's specifications. I'm not sure. That requires such a degree of globalization. And given that they're saying that will happen while at the same time you're going to get this huge fracturing of sovereignties, I'm not sure how well it would work for physical goods.
So here's the thing, Jack. Like, on the one hand, okay, so I'm going to simultaneously agree and disagree with you. On the disagreement front, it's really interesting what you're saying. I know it's hard to kind of get your head around, but it is actually happening. And if people want to check it out, there was an episode a month or two ago from the Economics for Business podcast. It's a podcast put out by the Mises Institute. And it was a really interesting episode where they were actually talking about, they called it like value, instead of thinking about value change, you think about value networks. And they were actually looking at, like, talking to this guy who was saying that, like, yeah, actually there's these platforms that connect suppliers and designers and of manufacturing and like sort of lower order goods, and actually doing that. Now, that's where I kind of disagree with you to say that is happening even in its nascent form. And it's very interesting. Even things like, you know, drop shipping businesses, as much disdain as I have for drop shipping businesses. In fact, no, if any of our listeners are running a drop shipping business and you're doing well, I fucking love you guys and you should support us on Patreon. But I will say to agree with you, if you want to produce something like a Tesla, like you need to be vertically integrated in the design and the manufacturing and that sort of stuff. So maybe for some classes of things that will happen, except Lego, Tesla, like certain aspects of Apple, like I know they outsource some of their computer chip manufacturing, but like a lot of it is vertically integrated. And even for the stuff that they outsource, they probably have intense like monitoring and control of like the processes. So it probably just depends like the specifics, but there are aspects that are being kind of networked like they're describing.
I agree with you that,
probably not
some of this is happening today in a nascent form. What I'm more saying is that our world today is highly globalized.
Yeah.
And in at least in the high income parts of the world, the geography of politics is very stable.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why people are flipping out over Russia's invasion of Ukraine is because at least in Europe, you haven't had that sort of political upheaval since probably, I guess Yugoslavia, like the breakup of Yugoslavia.
Yeah.
The civil war in the Balkans. Like we live in a relatively stable, globalized world, but what the authors are predicting is that's just going to fragment. And while I don't think that makes supply chains over large geographic areas impossible, I expect it probably would raise the costs on it. Again, they're trying to capture all of these different countercurrents. But yeah, in certain areas, I think that actually it'll probably get more difficult to run these distributed manufacturing networks than not. But then also it's a technological question. Like if 3D printing gets good enough, you could conceivably manufacture these sorts of things very locally, so long as you had access to raw materials.
Yeah, and yeah, I think that's a really interesting point actually. Yeah. It's almost is it a contradiction in their argument? They don't like.
I don't think it's a contradiction. I think like they're trying to sum up so many different so many different streams of events and trying to predict the future contingent upon so many different variables that I don't know if it's a contradiction. They're just vectors pointing in different directions, and whatever the vector of the future is will be affected by those in some way.
Yeah. One thing that they sort of noted, and they make reference to a Kevin Kelly book called what's it called? It's a really good book actually. I read it. Kevin Kelly book. So it's worth noting. Out of Control. Yeah, Kevin Kelly. So Kevin Kelly is like this really interesting like technologist. I think he co-founded Wired magazine, if I remember correctly. And he's got this good book called Out of Control, The New Biology of Machines, Social Systems, and Economic World, where he talks about like, kind of like through a network theoretic kind of systems lens, like the increasing connectedness of society. It's very interesting. And one of the points he makes is like, networked systems are like complex, they're called complex adaptive systems. And an interesting phenomenon of these sorts of systems is that like when you apply like some intervention, the system actually responds to the intervention, so it's like inherently unpredictable. And so this entire system, and one of the interesting things is like you can use like murmurations. So murmurations are like when you're looking at a flock of birds like what's the classic one? I can't remember what the classic murmuration bird is, but like a flock of these tiny little birds, maybe there'll be like a couple hundred or a couple of thousands of them, or even the really big flocks, there'll be like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of these birds. And they follow these really complex patterns that are like essentially like we can model them, but we can't like kind of deterministically predict how a given pattern of the birds will turn out. Because they're like chaotic systems where like slight variations in like each time step will cause massive variations at later time steps. And this is kind of like what's happening in the economic system. And so because of that, everything that they're talking about is like, they're really putting a lot out there to like, I guess that's why it's respectable that they're making concrete predictions. But they're essentially saying the world's going to get even more unpredictable, and yet they're making predictions about it.
Well, this is one of my favorite aspects of this book, in that they make these predictions and it forces you to think about how the future is going to look. I still think their direction of saying that you will get a fracturing of sovereignties is probably right.
I certainly
think
that
in such a world
benefit from a fracturing of that. Probably China and potentially even India. Like, how many different like subgroups in India could like really just be their own nation state? India and China.
Yeah, but that sort of instability and fluidity would probably also push people towards making more networked, not supply chains, but supply networks.
Yeah,
because it would just be, it might be more expensive, but it's also much more resilient.
Yeah, that's an interesting point.
And that sort of setup makes things just so much more unpredictable as well. So I really respect that the authors made a bunch of concrete predictions.
Do you want to talk about some of the concrete like technological predictions and see how they held up?
Yeah. One really cool one was they talked about digital servants.
We literally have that now.
Yeah, and I was about to say that we just have those. They nailed that one.
Yeah, and I'm about to like jump into there's this thing called LangChain, It's from like language chain. So like these things like ChatGPT, they're called LLMs, large language models, and so there's several of them. There's ChatGPT, but then you can sort of like make your own from sort of like off the shelf LLM software plus like a good database and stuff, or you can like use Bard and stuff. But what's interesting is LangChain allows you to, the reason why it's called LangChain is because it allows you to compose like basically inputs and the outputs of like different language models and then plug them together and to create like autonomous agents. And some of the stuff that people are doing with LangChain is like fucking amazing. And like
There's
basically
that even
almost
using
like
ChatGPT
is amazing.
as like an advisor. So my wife's got a startup. I mean, I don't need to tell you, but for listeners, she's in a startup and they're coding up their MVP at the moment, and she uses ChatGPT to do a lot of it because she says it just codes really well.
That's so good.
It's like when they run into a problem, they can ask ChatGPT what's going wrong, and it just tells them. Like we have digital servants already, and that technology is only going to accelerate unless. Now, of course, there are black swan events. Like if there's a huge solar flare and it wipes out almost all
it's going to be
objects. But barring those sorts of things, it's just going to accelerate.
And that's only ChatGPT 4. What about ChatGPT, 15? 12, 15. Like they're just, presumably, if it's exponential technology, which certainly seems like it is, it won't just be like, 2 times better or 5 times better. It could be 50 or 100 or 1,000 times better. What does it mean for ChatGPT to be 1,000 times better than it is now?
Yeah, well, it gets to a point where it's really hard to even imagine what that means.
I think it's great.
Like when the slope of that exponential curve gets so steep that it's really hard to predict what the next step is going to look like.
I think this is good. I just think it's understandable that people are freaked out a bit by it because it's a transformative technology. And even though people have been working on neural networks since like the 80s or something, and in the last 10 or 15 years, it's been popping off. Like there's something different. And I know even like 6 months ago, so there was the AI generative art that was people starting to really get into it. But there's something about the quality of ChatGPT with GPT-4 or GPT-3 that just like, there was like a qualitative change in how good it was that made people, certainly has given me a lot to think about,
Yeah. Well, it's such that now when you think about your future and what you're going to be doing, say for money, you need to take into account, okay, what will be able to be generated in, say, a handful of seconds that would take me weeks to do. You really need to think about that now.
And you really need, like in my opinion, you need to adopt this technology. Like when you see technology, like as Michael Saylor put it when he said it about comparing Bitcoin and fire, is like, the first people who saw fire didn't like sit around and debate about, should we use fire? Like they adopted it. They were like, yeah, give me that. I'm going to use that now to keep myself warm and cook my food. There's no arguing. And I think when you say understand Bitcoin, you go, yeah, give me that. I will take as much of that as I can.
He brought around to Bitcoin.
and when you see really high performance, like the breakthroughs in the LLMs now, and if they get it to like work really well with agent based modeling stuff or like autonomous agents, you should just go, okay, that is crazy technology. That'll probably affect me. How the hell am I going to use it?
Yeah, especially because, well, I was going to say especially because I want to make most of my money from writing and things like that. But then I thought actually for most people's jobs, you just need to consider that. Like what is able to be automated and what isn't.
Like I've adopted it for software engineering. It helps with, I've been playing around with using it to model. Like I would give it a description and then ask it to like, put out like a typed interface, and it doesn't always do like a perfect job or like that, but it's called a reinforcement learning with human feedback, RLHF, and it actually, if you respond to it and say, oh no, fix this thing or whatever, like it'll improve its response. And so you actually are in this kind of like feedback loop with the machine, and learning how to do that. Well, in this case, I'm using it to like do domain modeling for like typed programming language, TypeScript. It's really useful. What I found is like it helps me get out of like the programmer's equivalent of writer's block. So sometimes I just like my brain freezes up and I just think, oh yeah, like I just like, what am I going to do next? So with like this modeling of this part of the domain, right? Well, I just type out like a description of the domain, get into it, and then it'll just help me think through the thing. It's almost like having somebody to bounce ideas off.
Yeah, I want to use it, or I want to look into using it for proofreading. Looking for typos, looking for errors in formatting and things like that.
Do you use Grammarly?
Because that's really time consuming, really boring. Sorry?
Do you use Grammarly?
No, I don't.
I use Grammarly. I really like Grammarly, but I don't know if there would be something negative compared to ChatGPT for it.
Yeah, I need to look into those offerings. Here's another concrete prediction they made that I thought was really interesting, and it was a good one. They said that that mass programming entertainment, like television, so broadcasting, will be superseded by individualized entertainment and customized news. And that's called it spot on.
They called it narrowcasting.
Narrowcasting.
Which I really wish that we'd gone with that word. That's so cool. That sounds so cyberpunk.
Yeah.
Narrowcasting.
One thing they did get wrong with this prediction, though, is they seem to think that this narrowcasting would make people think more individually.
Yeah, it did the fucking opposite.
And make them think less tribally. Whereas I think the opposite has happened. I think a lot of algorithmically determined personalized news, for example, just makes people much more likely to get angry at each other over the internet over a handful of... They almost seem like corporate talking points. Like there are a handful of hot button issues that people are today expected to get angry about. Then next week it'll be something new. It seems to have actually made people tribalize a lot just over a shifting number of things.
Yeah. Huh.
I don't see any evidence of more independent thought because of things like Twitter. But then again, I think Twitter's a fucking sewer, so I'm not inclined to be very generous to it.
You know what? Like, what's interesting about the narrowcasting thing is you can train the algorithms. Like, if you just say like and ignore channels or like certain videos or like whatever, it'll try to improve like your experience and give you more of what you want. So if you just like subscribe to the Book Club from Hell and just go back and like all of our stuff, just go on YouTube, just like all of our videos, like you'll just get more of our content.
Then you will be happier.
If you just fucking love this, you'll be happier. And then when we start Crypto Nukes Australia secede Queensland from Australia,
from everything, from planet Earth,
everything,
and you get Space Queensland.
Like, the Jack and I become the God Kings of Earth. You'll be fully indoctrinated already, and you can be in the inner circle. So just go back and like all of our shit.
Yeah. That's obligatory. And there was an entire chapter in this book predicting our podcast and saying that people should send money to it.
Yeah, which you should.
That was probably my favourite concrete prediction that they made.
Yeah, there's a whole chapter where they just talk about how good Jack and Levi are at podcasting and how they will have so
written
many
in 1997,
fans.
which is good.
Yeah, 97.
So that's very impressive.
I was only like 3 years old or something. So like,
yeah, I was 4 or 5.
Yeah, and they called it, and they were like, Jack and Levi will be worth at least 3 or 4 Bitcoin in the year 2035, which means they'll be billionaires. And and yeah,
it'll be worth an infinite amount of money.
And they'll be infinite heirs. And that's all because they started an obscure podcast that you're listening to right now. What you're like, get this around your head, mate. Whoever you are listening, Jack. Jack, who do you reckon's listening? I think Daniel. Daniel. If you're listening to this right now, you know what, Daniel? You're like 4 hours into Jack and Levi talking about the sovereign individual telling Bitcoin jokes. You obviously like this content, Daniel. You should definitely go to our Patreon and give us some money. Good boy.
But their prediction about... So, again, this was published in 1997. Predicting in 1997 basically how the entertainment landscape looks today in 2023 is impressive. That was really good. Like, I only have small quibbles with how they predicted this. And
yeah, one of my small quibbles... Sorry.
Yeah, go on.
One of my small quibbles is just that they said gold-backed digital currency. I think, like...
Yeah,
obviously they're not. Obviously they're not. You know, it's really actually because I've been listening to the gold bugs talk about Bitcoin and like listening to debates between Bitcoiners and gold bugs, and it's really interesting. Like one of the gold bugs, Peter Schiff, he like is trying to advocate for gold-backed digital currency, right? And I mean, it's an interesting. Like I think it's a free market. You know, people can put out ideas. This is cool. But like the thing is like. How do you know, like, how much gold there actually is? Like, the whole, like, it just needs to be internet native. And so these guys they were trying to get at it, and obviously if they were Satoshi Nakamoto, they were like, they weren't. So they couldn't think through actually how you implement that idea in a pure distributed data structure. But, like, kudos to them for, like, kind of understanding directionally what to like go for, which is like some sort of like hard currency that's like extra sovereign. So, that's a small quibble, not really a big deal.
Yeah. Actually, are we meant to say that this is not business advice? Because it's not.
Not business advice. # do your own research. Not business advice, not financial advice. Do your own research, but definitely subscribe to us on Patreon.
Oh yeah, that's
financial advice.
That is financial advice.
That's both financial and spiritual.
That will make
advice.
you really wealthy.
That will make you spiritually wealthy, but financially poorer.
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's a good way to put it. You might be materially more poor if you give us $60,000 a month, but you'll be spiritually much richer. All right, which other predictions? Oh, they predicted the metaverse. So I said we'll have the metaverse. More economic activity will be in the metaverse, and it'll be out of the reach of bandits and governments. And whenever they talk about bandits, mentions of governments are not far behind.
Yeah, I think they kind of touch on it a little bit, sort of cybercrime, but I think like they kind of underestimated how big a fucking industry cybercrime would become. Like, cybercrime is fucking huge, yeah. And I think maybe
really
by implication,
when it needs to be,
and extremely sophisticated. So, like, ultimately, you actually need extremely sophisticated, like, a cybersecurity industry to like counteract that.
Yeah, because so it comes back to defending wealth. So even if you've got your wealth in something like Bitcoin, where unless you send it to someone, they can't steal it. But what that means is that as a cyber criminal, what you're aiming to do is coerce someone into sending you their cryptocurrency. And there are plenty of ways of doing that. And just because more economic activity goes online doesn't mean those ways disappear.
No, I guess it's just the cat and mouse race. What is that? How do you say it? Like just the game of cat and mouse, or the arms race. I guess it is. The arms race just becomes a cyber arms race.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I don't know.
Also, in terms of assets in the metaverse being out of the reach of governments, I guess it's similar to cybercrime in that maybe a government won't be able to just raid your crypto wallet in the same way that they can raid your bank account if they really want to. But there are ways that they can coerce you into giving them money into you, in inverted commas, willingly sending them the money that they want. I guess they might, like, maybe there'd be a reduction in that.
I suppose the argument is that
I don't think they're saying it'll go to zero.
The attack surface. Yeah, you're reducing the attack surface, or you're making it harder. Like, you're never gonna. There's no magical plane of existence where you're just completely free from attack vectors. But you know, you want to make it harder. And if digitizing your property, and turning it into, I don't know, like contracts or DAO memberships or Bitcoin or like whatever is one way of doing that, then sure, like that sounds like great. It's like, you know, it's good for people to have that option.
Yeah.
Did they talk about 3D printing at all in this one, or am I getting my wires crossed with another book? I don't think they talked about 3D
printing. I'm not sure they mentioned 3D printing.
3D printing, just to chuck that one in there anyway, it's like 3D printing is a decentralizing one, it seems, which is very interesting. You know, if you actually had a highly sophisticated
I thought of 3D printing when they were talking about delocalizing stuff, because so long as you can get, so suppose, just for argument's sake, you have a 3D printer that can print, you know, arbitrarily complex things. So long as you can get the raw materials to it, that is really decentralizing, because now you won't have those, say, big factories that can be coerced or exist to coerce others that need their services.
I suppose the ultimate decentralizing physical technology is the universal constructor. That like von Neumann originally came up with the idea of like the constructor, or the universal constructor, like a machine that can perform any physically possible transformation given the right input material, and it's loaded with the right program. And that's like David Deutsch's current research project, and it's really interesting, you know, like the theoretical idea of it. And I suppose we're just building more and more complex machines, sort of asymptotically approaching this theoretical construct, but like at the extreme, it's like, okay, if we were able to create something like akin to a universal constructor, and then our wealth is basically just like, what are the programs that we can feed and what are the raw materials we can feed into the constructor, that would be ultimate decentralization. It's like you can just have access to any transformation you want.
You could just make your own population from scratch. Just get it to make a bunch of humans.
Yeah. You could make your
pump
own...
out humans.
You could just pump out humans. You could just go to the Kuiper Belt and just pump out humans into space and just fill space full of like sort of dead fleshy corpses. You could turn the solar system into a corpse tree. Yeah, frozen humans floating around in the Kuiper Belt. That'd be
replace
creepy.
The asteroids in the Kuiper Belt just with frozen human bodies.
It'd be pretty fucking metal though.
That's a really good idea. Just strip entire worlds of resources so you can make humans in the cold vacuum of space who instantly die. So they can be in the Kuiper Belt.
So they can be in the Kuiper Belt.
It's basically a protection strategy against aliens, isn't it? Like if you get an alien,
just scare them the fuck away. They'll
cross the Kuiper Belt of just dead bodies, light years of dead bodies. And they'll just turn around and go, nope, this is a bad neighborhood. I'm not going in.
Just send a signal out.
Something's gone wrong.
We took our most advanced technology and we just created pure horror.
We created a get off my lawn sign.
A lot of weapons and stuff this episode. What's up with us, Jack? What's going on? What's up today?
Well, it's because we've been brainstorming for the autonomous weapon startup. Well, that's it. It's hard to get your head out of the game.
We go to Palmer Luckey and David Deutsch and say, all right, guys, we've got an idea. We're going to fill the Kuiper Belt with dead bodies.
Short-term goal, murder bots. Long-term goal, replace the Kuiper Belt with dead bodies. That's our stretch goal on Patreon. If we get enough money, we will make the dead body Kuiper Belt a reality.
Yeah, right after we destroy the ozone layer and declare nuclear war on the Antarctic.
Yeah.
Just completely destructive.
I'm partial to the idea of nuking the moon.
Fuck yeah.
Would you be able to see if you shot a really big hydrogen bomb at the moon? Like,
do you reckon if we could blow it up in the shape of a smiley face?
Do you reckon you could see it?
Yeah,
because that'd be really cool.
I reckon you could blow up. Could we reshape the shadows on the moon? Like the shadows are formed by the valleys and stuff on the moon. Could we reshape that shadow?
Could we make it so that the moon says BCFH?
BCFH on the moon. Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be some really good guerrilla book club from hell marketing. Well, it's not really guerrilla. Like, it's not underground because it's pretty obvious if you shoot a
Yeah,
bunch of
presumably
nukes at
we
the moon.
need to
But
harness a lot of energy and resources and manpower on the surface of the planet in order to be able to do that. But yeah, guerrilla. It's still guerrilla in like a kind of galactic scale. It's pretty guerrilla.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's still
Yeah.
small if you consider it from a big enough perspective.
If you just completely reframe it in terms of another order of magnitude, then yeah, it is a small thing.
Yeah. Well,
Guerrilla
would there be
marketing.
any downsides to shooting that many nuclear weapons at the moon?
I see no downsides.
Probably not.
Might
It'd probably
disrupt
be
the
alright.
Nazi base, but you know, I'm pretty
Yeah,
sure
they
they're
might
cool with that
notice.
sort of thing. They're pretty metal.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's actually not a bad idea.
Moon
We
is
would
fake
need more
anyways.
funding. I probably couldn't fund that myself.
Shout out to Michael Saylor. If you want to take any of the billions of dollars worth
We've
of
got a really good
Bitcoin,
project for
we've got a
you.
great idea. we're gonna blow up the moon.
No, we know you don't blow up the whole moon, but it's okay.
We
So
just
everyone
wanna-
likes fireworks, right?
Everyone loves
What about-
fireworks.
Yeah.
I don't know anybody who doesn't like fireworks.
How many
The only
Tsar
one is-
bomber sized bombs would you need to shoot at the moon to be able to see it with the naked eye? At
Couple
night?
million, maybe. No, maybe not even that. Maybe just
I actually
like
don't know. If anyone knows about nukes, in the Discord, I think there was someone called Void who knew a lot about nukes.
yeah, right.
If
And
someone
so-
knows just how many megatons we'd need to shoot at the moon to be able to see it with the naked eye at night from Earth, let us know. This is important.
Isn't there a person on the moon?
A person on the moon, like
Yeah,
right
there's a person on the moon.
now?
Yeah, there's a man living on the moon.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Okay. So when we're talking about downsides, he would probably notice if we just shot a bunch of hydrogen bombs at him.
I think he's immortal.
But you know, you can't make an omelette
He'll be
without
alright.
breaking some eggs, right? And this omelette is shooting nuclear weapons at the moon because you can.
Yeah.
And I'd say
guerrilla
that's worth
marketing.
it. Yeah, oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a marketing strategy. Sorry, I forgot.
And yeah, that's chapter 12. That's chapter 12 of the
Yeah.
sovereign individual.
Okay, which other predictions did they make before we got sidetracked about nuking the moon?
this is more of an institutional prediction than a technological prediction, but an institutional prediction was like, I think they called it government a la carte.
Yes, yes.
Because they're douchebags. Where you just reconceive the government as like rendering services for payment, and you enter into a like contract, like a sovereignty contract with a nation state or a city state, and you just will pay for the services that you use, and you know, because you're a fucking giga chad who earns like $1 trillion a second and you're so economically productive, they just like they'll give you a blowjob as you walk into the fucking to the embassy. So
Yeah.
they want
The
your money.
cyberspace officers.
They want
You have
your,
like a US.
economic
You'll have
output.
a little silicon mouth that you plug into a USB port that they'll activate when you enter their premises in the metaverse.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one because I think that has already been happening for a while. Like, hasn't it? Like, isn't it like that's the whole deal with places like Panama and I mean, as you were saying in the first half of the episode, like the multinational corporations were already doing that but on the scale of like billions of dollars. You know, like Apple holding their money in Ireland, or then there's Panama or Montenegro is the other famous one, tax havens. So maybe those sorts of arrangements become more and more common amongst smaller and smaller entities until it gets down to the point of individuals, where an individual might have $50 million worth of Bitcoin, and they just say, all right, well, I'm going to enter into like a non-standard negotiation with, I don't know, Switzerland or something for my sovereignty services.
Yeah. What I found really interesting was that the authors seem to be hinting that it won't even necessarily be geographically restricted like that, so that you have a single governing entity within some sort of geographic area. You might have multiple overlapping sovereignties. So
now that's a crazy
you
prediction.
subscribe to some private security service and they protect you. And then you also subscribe to... See, I'm not sure in terms of providing infrastructure like running water, how this would work, but you subscribe to some sort of utility service as well.
Everything's just privatized.
Yeah, it's
everything
just
really is just
paradise.
Libertarian, crazy crypto anarchist. Just you have a contract with every fucking light post you walk past. You got to enter into voluntary contract with everything. You step on a fucking lawn. It's just like, oh yeah, this lawn is somebody else's fucking private property. You fucking trespass now. You got to fucking you're gonna get.
Now you're getting shot
50 times or something. Yeah, you just get it shot on spot, and it won't even be like some old man with a shotgun. It'll just be a fucking drone will just laser you, eviscerate you.
Yeah, without mercy. Just won't even think twice about it.
And it'll be like, thank you for shopping at Amazon. You stepped on Amazon's property without signing a contract with Uncle Jeff first.
We just widowed your wife because you stepped on a square centimetre of someone else's lawn. Now your kids are going to starve. Congratulations.
and it's because the entire civilization is just run by like these automaton bot thingies. Like, there's no court of appeal. There's no like, oh mate, I didn't see the red light. Like, I thought it was fucking 50
there's
around
instant
here.
Death.
It's just instant death. Like RoboCop.
We will actually manage to make a society wherein all of the rules are actually formed by and enforced by non-human entities, and humans will just be cowering within this non-human infrastructure of rules.
It's like panopticon of rules and enforcer robots. And everybody will be happy because you won't own anything except for Bitcoin.
And I already feel slightly stressed by having the subscription services that I have. Just constantly getting messages like, oh, your payment details didn't work. We're going to try again tomorrow. Can you imagine that happening except with your security? Like, oh, we're not going to protect you from all of the marauders outside of your house anymore unless you pay us.
Stressful. I did an audit of my subscriptions the last week just because I'm like, I need to get my finances together, man. I'm, just like, Jesus Christ, like, you're fucking, like, nearly 30, dude. Like, come on, get your shit together. That's my self-talk. And so I'm like, okay, I'll just look over my bank account, like, say, what have I subscribed to? Jesus Christ, man, I just subscribed to random shit. And then I use it, like, once, and then I stop using it, and then it's like, I'm paying, like, $50 a month.
And then you forget about it.
What am I doing? What the hell am I doing? It's just like burning money. So as of next month, I'll have more money to buy Bitcoin with.
So anyway, the future is going to be a heaven of everything being a subscription service. Every job you have will be in the gig economy. It's going to be good.
And we'll just be eating...
Really looking forward to it.
Really looking forward to it. And everybody will just eat, like, crickets.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. You will eat bugs, and you'll love it.
You'll fucking love it. You'll fucking love it.
Yeah, there are some people who are really, really upset by the idea of other people eating bugs. Almost every time I've seen he's brought up the bug eating. He's really, really upset by the bug eating particularly.
So funny. Like, to be fair, like, hundreds of millions of people eat, like, bugs, right? And like other types of animals, just what you're used to.
Yeah. No, I only want to eat vertebrates.
No, the more legs the animal have, the better it tastes. I'm not even going to stop at squid. I just go straight to like millipede.
Yeah.
Roast that shit up.
You genetically engineer millipedes to have even more legs.
Legs on its back.
Billipede. A trilipede.
Trilipede. A trillion legs. Anyway, so where were we
Except
up to?
It's not even a misnomer. It actually just has a trillion legs.
Yeah. It's just a single neuron linking together a trillion legs.
Yeah.
This is like no other metabolism.
That's the future of human nutrition. You keep genetically engineering more and more legs into organisms, and
It makes it more
just
delicious.
the quality of the food, the quality of the nutrition increases. It increases linearly with the number of legs. This is how we feed
taste
the
as a
world by
function
just
of the
making
number of
one
legs, but-
organism with the maximum number of legs.
Yeah, we convert all the other agriculture into just like creating this infinitely long leg animal. And we all just
Just this twitching
feast on
mass
its legs.
of connected legs.
Wrapping around the sphere of the earth, just a single massive legs.
With Lovecraftian horror.
Whilst we're filling the Kuiper belt with human bodies.
With dead bodies. There's alien Galileo looking at us through its telescope.
Like, just is so scared he just like destroys all of his scientific artifacts and just like, no, we need to stay in the
Comes
Middle
back
Ages.
to their planet and is like, okay, you know this technology stuff, we've got to stop. I've seen
We need
where
to stop it. It's
goes.
gone too far. We don't want to. We'll just stay right here. They just cap the technology.
We're going to go back to pre-agricultural times. It's not worth it.
It was a better time.
Well, okay. What else did they predict? Oh, they predicted things like automated lawyers, which, yeah, probably.
Yeah, probably. I mean, those sorts of industries are probably going to be a bit more like I reckon lawyers might be a little bit slower to be automated, not necessarily because the technology can't do it, but just because of like the institutional like slowness of a field like law. And but I think probably it will. And maybe there's situations like the LLMs aren't like, they're not thinking, they're just making predictions according to like mathematical models that they're using. But like they do really good jobs, right? Like anybody who's ChatGPT is like, that's an amazing job. But when you're talking about like splitting up like $1 million estate in a divorce, or like when you're talking about like child custody situations, you probably want a human to double check what the robot's done.
Yeah, I was about to say there'll be certain fields like family law where part of the lawyer's job is also mediating between different humans. And a human is much better at that than ChatGPT. Certain things like commercial law, a bunch of things in that field I think could be automated.
Yeah.
But family law, stuff like that, probably much harder to automate. You probably don't want to. You'd certainly have tools to help the lawyers, but I think a lot of people want to talk to a human when they're getting a divorce or something like that.
Yeah, and maybe it just means they don't have to do as much grunt work. Like professions where like human connection is and like understanding ambiguous, like making sense out of ambiguity, those sorts of fields are going to be resilient to this sort of automation. Yeah,
or at least they'll change. So, for example, with medicine, I imagine over the next 10, 20 years, a lot of the cognitive tasks of doctors will probably be quite automatable. But patient interaction, people will still want to interact with humans. So I expect that role will change in that there'll be less diagnosis and procedural work and things like that, and more. You'll probably actually have the fields of nursing and medicine moving closer together.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I mean, so much respect for nurses already, but like nurses, their clinical skills are amazing compared to obviously not all nurses and not all doctors, blah, blah, blah. I know I'm making generalizations, but like there's a lot of nurses with amazing fucking clinical skills and really good people skills. And there's a lot of doctors who
they're extremely highly trained.
And so like if you basically imagine like being able to use this automation to bring up move the nurse up the stack, amazing. And then maybe doctors, like clinical doctors, move into like other aspects that currently they don't use, like they don't do stuff in yet, but maybe they move to like I don't know, more research or something.
Counter-Strike, skin gambling or something like that.
Yeah, or just like doing foreign exchange, crypto leveraged hyper gambling on anonymous offshore exchanges. Who knows? You know, the future is open.
You can do anything.
So it's super interesting. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know where it goes. Oh, telemedicine. They made a prediction about telemedicine and about like precision medicine at a distance.
Yeah, you want a really fucking good internet connection for that.
Yeah, you don't want a fucking shitty Australian internet connection. you want some fucking South...
Australia would be the last part of the world to get it.
You want a South Korean internet connection for that shit. You want like top of the fucking line, like 0 ping.
No, it's going to be like, okay, so when you're playing a game of Counter-Strike and you've got shitty lag and you keep missing all your shots because of the lag, imagine that, but it's surgery.
Yeah,
the surgeon keeps like chopping out the wrong bit of the brain and he's just screaming down his headset, using all the gamer language he knows, screaming about lag, calling everyone else slurs like a true gamer. That's what telemedicine's going to look like.
Yeah, so good. But then you think like, well, do the robots just do that as well? And then the humans are just
eventually,
it?
Yes. It's just like the safety requirement needed for these sorts of tasks. So it's not like when you can laugh at an image, like some sort of AI model that labels images, which can't tell the difference between a chihuahua's face and a blueberry muffin. It says, oh, these are the same thing. These are both dogs. The downside of that happening is a lot worse when you're trying to do a Whipple procedure or something like that.
Yeah, but maybe one of the only problems is that the reason why these sorts of algorithms are so powerful is because of the amount of data they have access to. So I just wonder, like, with certain types of surgeries, would they have enough training data to actually do this? With the current
I've found that particularly on YouTube, there's a never-ending supply of Indian doctors just filming operations.
Never-ending supply of Indian doctors.
It'll probably all just be trained on
filming themselves, popping people with blackheads.
Dodgy, shitty quality, shitty image quality videos from Indian surgeons just filming their day job and uploading it to the internet.
Filmed on a potato.
Yeah.
Filmed on an iPhone. Potato 9000. And and the ones that I fucking love were like when I was studying stuff was were the doctors, the Indian doctors, they film themselves popping people's like blackheads. Like pushing.
Oh yeah.
It's so fucked up but so satisfying at the same time. Yeah, look up blackhead removals on YouTube, guys. It's fucking crazy.
Or the cyst drainage videos. And especially when it's someone doing it in their living room with a bread knife.
Oh, man. Or you want to see the craziest ones? The craziest ones are like worm removals.
Yeah, those are really gnarly.
And hookworms? Hookworm removals? Fuck me, man. That's some serious... Parasitology always freaked me the fuck out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You see a surgery of someone pulling a hydatid cyst out of someone's brain.
Oh my God. Yeah, you see, I think that we should be more open to just completely eradicating certain species. I think that we should go out in the world and find all those fucking nasty flukes and worms and shit, and we should just hunt them down and destroy them. I have absolutely no sympathy.
We should genetically engineer infectious organisms to infect those other organisms.
It becomes like the
I just don't see any way that this could go
out
wrong.
Of The Simpsons. Have you seen that? It's like where they've got a snake problem. They've got in Springville. They've got like a snake problem, so they introduce like gorillas or something. Or like they introduced what was it? It was like like some sort of like a bandicoot or something to get the raccoons to get the snakes, and then they need to get rid of the raccoons, so they get the gorillas. And it's like that, except with parasites.
Yeah, exactly. So you need to miniaturize gorillas.
To attack the nematodes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You just eat a capsule which contains like 5
miniaturized
gorillas
inject
which rampage through
nanometer gorillas
kill any sort of worm they find.
And they're all like Donkey Kong gorillas, and they've even got the little hats.
And they just throw barrels at the.
So you need to miniaturize little barrels as well, and put those into your system.
Yeah, there's a lot of R&D required, but I think this is workable.
But it's exponential technology, so like people think it'll be 100 years, but it's really more like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, we're going to have miniaturized gorillas. And you could use them for a lot of things. Because if you made them even small, so suppose you've got a problem with your cholesterol. If you made really small gorillas that could recognize cholesterol in the blood and just smash it.
Subcellular scale gorillas just run
really.
there.
So it's about getting the right size of gorilla. Yeah, exactly. That's a good idea. We just need to iron out some of the technical details. We also would need the gorillas to be able to breathe underwater, given that they would be in your blood.
Although they could have tiny little
So you need to modify
scuba,
the gorillas a little bit.
little tiny gorilla scuba masks.
Actually, yeah, that's a better idea than making gorillas that can breathe underwater. You just give them really small scuba suits.
There's these things called rebreathers. They're for diving. Instead of taking down tanks, you recycle the air. Yeah, we could give the gorillas these little rebreathers, and then they could stay inside you for like 13 hours, taking out the plaques.
Yeah. You'd need the gorillas to be dissolvable as well, though.
And lipid soluble.
You don't want to clog up your blood with little gorillas. So we need dissolvable gorillas with little rebreathers.
With little rebreathers to run around clearing out the cholesterol.
Okay. So we just solved medicine, because I don't think there's any real pathology that couldn't be solved by targeted small gorillas put in the right place. I'd say that's pretty good work for an episode.
We just solved medicine. There, done.
We just
billionaires. Little tiny gorillas. Little tiny gorillas.
I'll never be hired at a hospital again after coming out with just such disruptive technology as the tiny gorilla idea.
Yeah, the entire medical industry around the world, the global medical
for the
industry.
collapse of the medical profession.
Because you've replaced all doctors and nurses with little gorillas. Little gorillas. Introducing Little Gorillas by Dr. Jack. The Little Gorilla 9000 now with rebreather technology.
Okay, other than the little gorillas, which other projections did they make?
It's in the book. It's in the book, guys. Go read it. Little gorillas.
Yeah, most of this book's actually talking about
actually about little gorillas.
So, I guess we discussed this in the previous episode, how government's going to try to rally nationalist sentiments to protect themselves against an inevitable decline in their revenues. We probably don't need to talk about that anymore, do we? Actually, here's an interesting one. They said there's going to be an equalization of wealth among geographic areas. So a region in Africa at the moment will be generating as much wealth as a region in North America or in Europe, because you're going to have access to cyberspace
between the little gorillas.
And yeah, everyone's going to have access to these little gorillas and microprocessing technology. But the differential of wealth within a given area will be much sharper, because you'll have a handful of hyper-productive Sigma males who are just grinding out. They're optimized as fuck. They're currently training for their 60th marathon and an Ironman, while also just making like 1 trillion little gorillas per second. Because the little gorillas are going to be the form of exchange in the future. Bitcoin is going to be killed by little gorillas. People are just going to be trading little gorillas for goods and services.
The medium of
and then
exchange, the little gorillas have become the global medium of exchange.
By getting money from the government, which forcibly taxes the most productive members of society, takes all their little gorillas and redistributes the little gorillas to less productive people. Those people are just going to be so much poorer. So there's going to be the Gini coefficient is going to be out of control. But there is going to be an equalization of wealth between geographic regions. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, no, it's quite insightful.
Yeah. I feel like the rest of this episode is just going to be us talking about little gorillas.
It's so good. Just the image of little gorillas is just so satisfying. I want one.
It's hard to predict the future of technology, and no one predicted the little gorillas, did they?
It's hard to predict the future of the little gorillas. Once that comes, that is a world-stopping technology.
Because it's even, you imagine, so people are always worried about Moore's law running out. Well, if you can keep miniaturizing gorillas to perform effectively the task of logic gates, you just have all these little gorillas acting as logic gates.
Yeah, like quantum logic gate little gorillas. Just controlling
quantum little gorillas.
Quantum little gorillas.
Subatomic little gorillas.
The size of quarks. Little gorillas the size of quarks.
You have little gorillas existing in superposition states.
Infinite little gorillas across the entire quantum multiverse. It just turns out the universal wave function, we're all just made of tiny little gorillas.
Just little gorillas.
We're actually just an emergent phenomena of this coagulation of little gorillas. And when we inject the little gorillas into our system, it turns out that we reunify the different levels of reality.
Yeah. What's Stephen Wolfram talking about his theory that the entirety of nature really is based on cellular automata. These tiny little, these
tiny little gorillas,
little things just performing basic functions, but they have this incredible emergent complexity. Well, those cellular automata are just little gorillas.
Little gorillas. There's 10 to
really
100 little gorillas just updating reality every picosecond. Throwing barrels at one another through the quantum multiverse.
That's the means by which they interact. That's the basic function performed by a little gorilla, is to throw a barrel at another little gorilla. Here's something. So the authors say that the cyber economy is too fluid to be monopolized by a single government, which is part of the reason why it will break up nation states. But then there are certain nation states, like in China, where they've been able to effectively make a walled garden of the internet. Do you think that's sustainable? Do you think they can maintain that walled garden Chinese internet?
Yeah, a really interesting technology that's come out recently is Noster. It's called Notes. It stands for Notes and Other Stuff Over Relays. Mm-hmm. And it basically it's a protocol suite. So it's a bunch of it's a set of protocols for exchanging messages between servers and clients and stuff, using asymmetric public-private key cryptography, where you basically can distribute messages to other people, say tweeting, you say, you could subscribe to me, but you don't subscribe to me on any particular server. And you don't subscribe to a handle, you subscribe to a public key. And I have control of publishing to all of my followers who are following my public key, because I can sign any message with my private key. And then I send it to these relays, this open network of servers. And it's resilient against attack, because I might elect 3 or 10 or whatever relays to send out my messages into the network. And then if one of them gets taken down, it's that's fine. You have redundancy, right? But you also have anonymity or privacy, because it's using public-private key cryptography. Unless you want to be known, you don't have to associate your identity with the public key. And so that has been popping off in China, and Chinese relays have been being shut down because during the protests, when was that, 12 months ago, the big ones that were popping off, it turns out students and stuff in China were using Noster to communicate. And I think they're struggling to keep this Noster relay networks from popping up in China. It's pretty crazy. Yeah, it's super interesting.
That's something in That's something that the authors of this book did really well, in that they traced a lot of future developments back to encryption technology and private public key encryption technology.
Yeah, it's
So
unbelievably
it sounds like they obviously didn't explicitly predict something like Nostr, but they did say that this encryption technology is going to be the basis for so much of the change in political systems. That's pretty cool. I do think they really, really got that aspect right.
Technology. When you actually get your head around, sorry, I'm like, there's just so many tiny little gorillas in my throat. It's making it hard for me to breathe. Yeah, so there's man, I must sound like a broken record. Like I just say like Popper or fucking Deutsch or Michael Saylor like every other episode or every episode. But I'm just saying one more thing about Sunset. He made this really interesting point about like, you want to master the technologies that are commercializing at the time that you're coming of age. And I would argue that you're coming of age between like your early 20s and like your sort of mid to late 30s, depending on like when you finish uni, Levi. You should have fucking finished uni a bit earlier. Yes. But like, I would say that like strong encryption, especially in the form of like Bitcoin, but also like para-Bitcoin technologies like Nostr and Lightning and stuff, is like one field of technologies that's like maturing and commercializing, and we're about to see like 5 to 10 years of explosions in like technologies related to encryption and like that sort of encrypted social media, encrypted like assets, encrypted cryptocurrencies and that sort of stuff. And then the other one is like that's about to commercialize really heavily is like obviously like LLMs and reinforcement learning and these like bots and autonomous agents. And those are the two big ones that I reckon are probably going to characterize like the next 5 to 10 years of like crazy technology stuff. It's pretty cool. Yeah, and there might be other ones as well that I'm not aware of. Obviously things like streaming has been really big. We're using that right now, obviously. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's profoundly transformative technology when you just realize like what encryption essentially allows you to do is it allows you to put a wall between you and an attacker. And what that means is there's actually an emerging economy. It's like the cyberpunk economy or like the cipher, as in like encryption cipher, like the cipher economy. And the cipher economy is represented by like the quintessential case would be like a person on using Tor to communicate with Nostr relays builds up, 100,000 followers completely anonymously, where they're all following his or her public key and they're publishing their thoughts and they can't be tracked. And then they monetize like their publishing using Lightning wallets that are completely anonymous and can't be tracked. And they make like a shitload of money off just like distributing information over like Nostr or something like that. That would be like the kind of archetypical example of the sort of like that's the sort of thing that's possible now, at least in principle. That person might exist already, if not at a huge scale, but kind of like potentially there might be on the Nostr network right now somebody who's making money through Lightning and they're completely anonymous. And yeah, that's what these people are talking about. And none of their transactions, none of the payments that they're getting sent are traceable by the government. If that person doesn't exist now, the capability exists.
Brings me around to actually one of their concrete predictions is that democracy won't survive the next few decades.
That's a crazy prediction, isn't it?
Yeah. So these authors very much believe that there's a hierarchy of talents in people, and that some people are just going to be wealthier and more productive than others by virtue of the fact that they're smarter or that they have some predisposition to skills that are valued by society at that given time, or whether they have like a better work ethic than others. And they say that democracy basically existed because of a few historically contingent circumstances which won't be sustained. So they said that cheap and widely dispersed weaponry and weaponry that can be used effectively by non-military trained people, and a military advantage for a large number of infantry. Lots of standardized work in factories, admin jobs. Those are the sorts of things that allow democracy, because it allows a sort of flattening of people's productive output. And also it's more easily controlled by a central government, more easily taxed, in the case of, say, standardized work in factories or in administrative roles. but they think that these conditions will disappear. They also say that democracy makes substandard leaders and so isn't worthwhile. I do think the leaders made or selected by democracy oftentimes aren't great, but that's probably not where the value of democracy is. The value of democracy is more being able to circulate leaders and circulate elites rather than necessarily selecting the best leaders. Because if you look at our current crop of elected leaders, it's not particularly inspiring. But I don't think that's the advantage of democracy.
I'm very undecided on this.
I think probably, like, maybe a more important question in politics than how do you select good leaders is how do you get rid of bad ones? And I think democracy does that better than many other systems that we have. And that's a big advantage of democracy.
Sorry, I think that's something that these kind of crypto anarchists don't seem to address directly. I've never heard them address it directly. I don't know what they're... Maybe if I tried to stillman the position, maybe they'd say something like market forces with voluntary contracts or something like that is actually a better error correction mechanism than the slow institutional cycles of like hijacked, politically charged, often 2 or 3 party states. Maybe I don't actually know what their response is. That's why I've suggested we should read Hans Hermann Hoppe's Democracy: The God That Failed, because that's like the Bible of the people who think this way. But I haven't read that yet, so I don't know.
Yeah, it's probably a better steel man of their position than we could offer.
Yeah, but I think that it does. They raise a super important point, which is like, it is a fact that just when you look at the books, just a relatively small number of people foot the tax bills, and I don't know if we need to get into the discussion about inflation, but like certainly it's not the case that like taxes. So wealth is not evenly distributed, income is not evenly distributed, but also tax burden is not evenly distributed. So like if these technologies shift that axis, then maybe it'll like really affect the way that modern Western liberal democracies are able to actually like essentially like try to buy votes by saying we're going to give benefits to this group of people or whatever, because they won't be able to afford it anymore. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they can't afford it at the moment. It's mostly funded by debt.
Yeah, so they're taking from the future. But eventually that debt's going to come due in some way or another, whether it's through hyperinflation or defaulting into debt or whatever. Unless you believe in MMT, in which case you can just have as much sovereign debt as you fucking very well like.
Believe in magic.
You just believe in fucking magic. But, I suppose, like, you can try to read fucking tea leaves as well if you like. Whatever.
Yeah, they also say, given that there'll be so many different polities and sovereignties, the outcomes of governance policies will come to matter a lot more to people who are looking around for a jurisdiction than the process by which these policies were conceived of and validated. And I think that's interesting. So I guess at least for people who are highly mobile, like if they really don't like the direction that a certain jurisdiction is going in, they'll just leave, is probably what the authors would say.
That's very interesting, isn't it? I think that's good. I think it's a good thing. There's an interesting little book. I think it's called Vote Something Leave. It's a book. It's basically like you can vote with your vote directly. You can vote with your voice by like doing things like, writing to a politician, I suppose, or like doing something in the media. You can vote with your dollars in the market or by boycotting stuff, or you can vote by leaving a jurisdiction if you are lucky enough to live in a jurisdiction where you can actually leave. And yeah, I think that's a mechanism that, I suppose what they're arguing is that as you digitize your wealth, the cost of leaving is lower and lower. Whereas like, if all your wealth is tied up in, say, real estate or like, say like stocks or equity in like a jurisdictionally restricted and regulated corporate entity, then you're very tightly coupled. Your physical body is very tightly coupled to the physical jurisdiction. So you want to decouple those two so you can leave when you want.
Yeah, that is a criticism I have of this book, where both authors seem to think that most people can or maybe should be able to just leave certain areas, and particularly the groups of people who live in those areas, without so much as a backward glance. I think most people find it quite hard to move countries, so to leave their family circles, leave their friends, leave their language, their culture, and things like that. And I think most people will be quite unhappy if they're just constantly moving around and not belonging to something in that way.
Yeah, and I think
I don't know how reflective that is of the vast majority of people.
I think maybe what they might, at least the way I interpreted it, and I might be wrong, but like, is more like it gives people that option. So it's like you don't have to actually leave, but if a large number of people have the option, then it's like you can't push people as much.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. So if they can at least credibly threaten to leave,
it's like you don't actually have to act on it for it to be an effective tool. Yeah, that's right. So it shifts the almost like the game theory of it, I suppose. But yeah, obviously there's social and emotional and cultural costs to leaving. It's just not purely economic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They've got this section at the end of the book on the social morality in the information age that I thought was really interesting.
Yeah.
Where they're basically talking about how our culture will change to reflect this much more mobile, less geographically located world. And I like this quote of theirs. So they said, "Cultures are not matters of taste, but systems of adaptation to specific circumstances that may prove irrelevant or even counterproductive in other settings." So they have this idea that, with which I'd largely agree, that many aspects of culture are actually adaptive changes to local circumstances.
Yeah.
That people en masse behave in different ways in response to local circumstances. And those behaviors that are more advantageous tend to stick around when compared to those which don't. And from this, they try to predict how the culture of the future will look. And I thought that was a really, really cool project.
Yeah, that's a fucking difficult one, isn't it? I have a framework in my...
It's really, really ambitious.
I have a framework in my head. Does this touch on morality? Maybe I can bring in a morality part of it. I haven't really thought through the morality of it. But I have a framework in my head for kind of like... is it anthropological or something? Like understanding of humans. And it's pulled from... One part's pulled from Deutsch, one part's pulled from Popper, and one part I've tried to add myself. One part is like Popper says the closed society versus the open society, and the closed society is one where like criticism is restricted, and the open society is one where there's a culture of criticism and you have like essentially freedom of speech. And then Deutsch innovated on that. He added dynamic versus static society, where a static society is one in which like not much change occurs, or no, at the extreme, essentially negligible changes occurs over the course of a single person's lifetime, such that the society that they're living in is largely the same. Whereas a dynamic society is one where like a lot of changes occurs within a single person's lifetime, and obviously that can accelerate, like we're experiencing at the moment. My addition to that was like concrete versus abstract. To be honest, Popper actually said that first, but I tried to think about it more, and I think like it's a really good point. Like societies used to have much more concrete relationships between people. Like even in the extreme, it was like small tribal societies in Australia. Like they had very close knit, interesting kinship networks, and probably everybody knew everybody and that sort of stuff. And whereas now it's like we're becoming increasingly abstract. Even the idea of just a medium of exchange means that you can abstract away a personal relationship with other people in an economic network to like engage in cooperation with people. You just engage through the API of the medium of exchange. And but now it's like we've got that online. It's like, okay, you could conceivably like make money by just gaining an audience on a pseudonymous Twitter account, and it's just completely abstracted away. Like it's so abstract.
Yeah.
And now you can do that through a blockchain, which is just like even more abstract. So it's like this idea, like the skill of thinking abstractly is becoming more and more valuable. But I have not been able to get my head around, like, well, what does the morality, like, where does the morality sit in this kind of tri-axis of dynamic, we're increasingly dynamic. I would hope that we're becoming increasingly open, though that's not necessarily clear to me, but increasingly abstract global society.
Yeah.
I haven't actually considered the morality piece of that, but I might think about that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, they seem to view morality here in quite a utilitarian way, in that in many ways they seem to be saying that that morality evolves as an adaptive mechanism with respect to the circumstances within which a given culture is situated, and that some of those just promote behaviors that are more conducive to greater amounts of production. So, for example, not stealing from each other. They seem to see as an evolved morality, which allows societies to scale better than ones in which stealing's cool and is encouraged.
That's interesting, because I think, like, stealing on the internet, if I think there's lots of hackers and there's lots of scammers, and they can, like, in some cases just get away with it. There's no consequences, and they don't even see the face of the person they're stealing the money off. So you need to make technology that just defends against that.
And actually, as in response to that, they did bring up that they expect that in the future, things like a reputation for honesty will be much more highly valued than it is now.
Yeah, that's super interesting.
Given that it will be so easy to just steal stuff. Or if for example, you're part of this anonymous virtual corporation, it'll be easier for people anonymously to just steal stuff. So having a reputation of being really, really honest will be worth a lot more in the coming social morality. I thought that was a really interesting prediction.
That's super interesting. Yeah, that's why it's interesting. Like, on some of the blockchain projects, like outside of Bitcoin, like they're looking at, like, trying to associate like reputation and stuff. Like, even in some of the decentralized autonomous organizations, they're trying to, like, sort of have quantified reputation attached to these, like, identities. Some super interesting experiments. I haven't seen anything really compelling yet, but you never know where it'll go.
One thing I also found really interesting was that they're not advocating for moral relativism here. They do seem to be saying, no, there are certain behaviors which are just moral, which are just beneficial. And they're arguing against a total moral relativism, but also against brittle, very, very strict moralities which don't update over time as the circumstances within which a moral system exists change.
Okay, so maybe if I just map that into what I was talking about before, so you're more abstract, more dynamic, more open, and also more interconnected, and potentially more decentralized world. Those are the other two things: is connectedness and centralization versus decentralization, are the other axes that I think about sometimes. So if I map morality into that, it seems as though, like, you need to cut through. You need to be able to be seen as, like, as an individual on your own merits, like the quality of your work, your integrity, which I would say, like, always mattered anyways, but, like, maybe it matters even more so in this world now.
Yeah.
You just juiced up. You just, like, there's people are basically, like, you could have interactions with thousands and thousands and thousands of people by the time you're in your 20s online, maybe more. And so in order to, like, be seen by those people as somebody that is worth following or worth supporting or worth working with or whatever, you need to be seen as, like, actually, yeah, this person has integrity. And the people who don't have it, it's like, what are those kids online, those two brothers, the blonde ones, who the YouTube, like, they had, like, a boxing match with like some famous.
Oh, the Disney Channel ones.
Yeah, those kids. Like
Paul.
Oh yeah, the brothers. Yeah, the Paul and something. Yeah, this shows how up to date Jack and I are with the meme culture. Logan Paul.
Down with the kids. Logan Paul.
Yeah, like, they arguably acted.
And the other one.
Yeah, his little brother or whatever. Like, they had a very severe lapse of integrity during the crypto bull run of 2021, 22, the NFT stuff. And, like, maybe they made a few $1 million or how much they made, $5 million or something in the short run. But then arguably, like, they've like fucking destroyed their reputation. And it's like, if you're a large scale influencer over the course of 20 years or something, like their reputation would be worth more than $5 million, over the course of their career. And maybe they've just like flushed that down the fucking drain,
Yeah, that's why we're very, very upfront with how honest and trustworthy we are.
We're scamming the shit out of you.
The Little Gorillas idea was a scam. It was just a rug pull operation.
It was just a rug pull.
There were never any little gorillas.
There were never any little gorillas the whole time.
They never existed.
They never even started the project, man. They rug pulled us. They just got some guy on Fiverr and fucking put little gorilla faces on fucking Virions,
all that money
man.
we raised for the little gorillas, I just spent in Roblox.
Roblox and Lambos.
Yeah. Well, Lambo's in Roblox.
Lambo's in Roblox. Yeah. So I think that's a good point. I think that's interesting. I don't know if I fully agree with them, but it's an interesting thought experiment to think through.
It's a sort of thing where I don't have a fixed opinion on it. I haven't thought about it. Well, I haven't come to a firm conclusion. What about this? This take is definitely going to be one of their most controversial ones.
Yeah, go on.
Where they talk about, okay, so this social morality, or the evolution of moralities, they view as effectively being driven by market mechanisms. No. I guess you could then say, okay, it's driven by Darwinian mechanisms. So those behaviors which promote, say, group cohesion, amassing wealth, protecting wealth, providing security, tend to outcompete those groups which are governed by less competitive rules. On the basis of this, they say that subsidizing bad behavior with things like welfare or international aid does people a disservice by removing effectively price signals of people's morality, which is why we should get rid of international aid. I really liked this. I've never heard this argument against international aid before.
Extremely sophisticated moral argument against just defunding the welfare state and ending foreign aid. This is just curmudgeonly old men complaining about their taxes. It's just really just like an incredibly sophisticated complaint about paying taxes.
That is basically this entire book.
The entire book
is a really long meditation on why they don't like paying tax.
And then trying to like flim-flam something in there about technology. And then finishes with...
And complaining about the Clintons. There is a lot of complaining about the Clintons.
Yeah, complaining about the fucking Clintons, yeah. And then it just finishes with, and about the authors in appendix, resources for achieving independence, where they just plug their fucking consulting services.
They're just selling you their services. They're plugging their equivalent
just scare
of
you into
services.
Fear about the oncoming like apocalyptic end of the world, but you can make shitloads of money if you just evade taxes and store all your wealth in Bitcoin.
Don't worry, mate. We've got a financial services newsletter which will fix everything up.
We've got a financial services newsletter, but yeah, I fucking love this book though.
I really enjoyed this book. I'd recommend this book to basically anyone. Even when you don't agree with them, even when they're being curmudgeonly, even when they're being like old man yells at cloud about paying too much tax, they bring up so many really interesting points. They make a lot of predictions which were accurate, like in 1997 about the world
still
today.
Come true. Yeah, and some of them,
which still may come true. Some of the ones which haven't proven true quite yet. It's a really interesting book. It's fun reading too because the authors are just so elitist. They keep going off on tangents about how people are fundamentally unequal. They complain. I think there was a section where they were complaining that in certain jurisdictions at the moment you can only get McDonald's, but now because of... Oh no, in the past you could only get McDonald's, but now because of international hotel chains, you can get Bollinger wherever you are in the world. They're just...
Well, they know their target
They're
market.
just obviously both extremely wealthy, curmudgeonly men, which is quite funny to read.
And they really just know that, like, the people who are going to read this and want to get our investment advice, they're just like, bankers and financiers and probably like, tech entrepreneurs and stuff who just want to like minimize their taxes and just fucking buy Bentleys and shit. And so we're just going to sell them that narrative.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. I really like the book though, and also
It's a good book. I
the
recommend
guy's
it.
interview with Robert Breedlove is actually really interesting as well. he like reflects on the book and stuff. As much fun as I make of this guy, these two.
Well, it's part of the fun of this book in that it's quite a ridiculous book, but it also is a worthwhile book. It's the best combination.
Yeah, it is a good combo. It's kind of like Atlas Shrugged, just like a ridiculous book, but you're also like, oh, they make some good points, but also then they're paying for gold in their fucking hyper-productive utopia. And gold's just gold. It's like, yes. Oh, God. Yeah, it's so funny. Man, we need to read some, like, ridiculous shit from the left or something now, you know? Like,
Yeah. Well, we've got that feminist glaciology paper.
yeah, that's coming up. And do we? What's our? You suggest a couple. Should we? Were you going to say a 40K book or something, or like a?
So J-Man from the Discord suggested an Evolian reading of a Warhammer 40K novel, which does actually sound pretty fun.
Oh, we need fitness. Yeah. I think let's do that. An Evolian reading of a 40K book. Should we pick a 40K book? I feel like either we go just with the classic like there's this, I can't remember.
Apparently the Horus Heresy ones are good.
The Horus Heresy is like the best one. And apparently it's actually like a fantastic book. The original, like the first in the series of the Horus Heresy. Yeah.
I would really also like to, in addition to doing funny, like making fun of funny progressive stuff and doing Evolian readings of 40K novels, I want to find some really weird fitness trends. Because there's some absolutely stupid bro science out there. I love bro science, but some of it is actually not true, unfortunately. Every now and then, bro science isn't true. And I would like to cover some dumb bro science.
Yeah, maybe we should cover some bro science.
Yeah. What else do we have to say? Oh, yeah. Thank you for everyone who sends us questions on Discord. We'll probably have an episode where we collect together those questions and answer them.
Yeah.
That's coming up.
Oh, what should we call the I'm going to make a fitness channel on the Discord. What should we call the fitness channel? Because I was born in the dankness is the meme channel. I think maybe we shouldn't change because it's just like such a long name. Born in the dank. I was born in the dankness. I do love dankness. Then we've got...
Yeah. The problem with calling the fitness channel Yukio Mishima is that will only make sense to a small number of people who are probably already invested in the Discord.
What about what about something crazy to do with like we could just call it like body dysmorphia. Body dysmorphia.
Yes. Very accurate. Yeah.
Or bigorexia. Maybe I'll call
Extremely.
it bigorexia.
I feel somewhat attacked. It's so accurate.
Bigorexia. Yeah, I'll call it bigorexia. Yeah, nice. That's so good. I love the Discord. You guys are fucking awesome.
All right. Do you have anything else you want to say?
I just want to say, you guys are awesome. Thanks for listening. If you actually listen to the end of this episode, that's very impressive.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
I hope you too love little gorillas as much as I do.
The little gorillas and inscribing the BCFH insignia on the moon.
So the best thing that you can do to support the channel is share it with a friend or share it on social media, support us on Patreon, or join the Discord. Any of those options are fantastic options. Join the Discord is great. We have a great time, and you'll join a bunch of weirdos like yourself who will listen to 5 hours of me and Jack talking about the sovereign individual.
Yep, that's everything. Thanks for listening.
Good night.
Thank you. See you all next time.